Record. Hi today and welcome to our presentation. We are presenting about coral bleaching. My name is Kaylani Kitchell Mayberry.
And my name is Andrew Simpson.
Thank you.
All right, so beginning with learning about what corals are. Corals are made up of small animals called coral polyps, which are distant cousins of jellyfish. Corals have a symbiotic relationship with tiny algae called zooxanthellae, which photosynthesizes energy from the sun and provides about 90% of the food corals need. The zooxanthellae colors are simply a side effect of their main function to the corals to provide food. The algae benefits from corals by providing them with a place to live and providing them nutrients such as carbon dioxide. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the planet, yet over 1 billion people are estimated to depend on coral reefs for food.
And this is just a picture of how the coral looks like, or how parts of a coral look like. You have the tentacles, you have the mouth, and you can see how a big portion of them are like stuck to the basal plate. So very important. They are just species. They are simple species, but we highly depend on them. So what is coral bleaching? So when colorful coral turn pure white, the sudden change is cause for an alarm. A bleached coral's white skeleton is fully exposed, making the animal look dead. What happens is that the coral polyps, are under a lot of stress, and this happens when the algae, instead of producing food and nutrients for the corals, start producing chemicals that are very harmful to them, and they start expelling it out, leaving it vulnerable, and that's how you get the look of the pure, like a white. Um, in addition, in addition to hurting the coral animal itself, coral bleaching greatly affects the fish that depend on the coral for food and shelter. Uh, in fact, research has shown that nearly 1/4 of all known fish species live among coral reefs. And when we start losing the coral reefs, a lot of those fishes aren't protected and don't have food, so they either get eaten by bigger marine life or they move to a different area where they can find food and shelter. Fishes that live within the corals are thought to receive the burnt of the coral stress response, as these fishes are easier for predators to spot when hiding within a bright coral reef. So protection meaning that when these fish are in the corals, they're like a camouflage. So when these fishes are going to the corals that are turned white, they are no longer protected and they can't be like hidden, and so predators find it so much easier for them to attack them. So again, this is how on the left side you can see the algae and the coral still working together, but then you start seeing the white skeleton, which means it's under stress and it's kicking the algae out because it's not giving them nutrients and food. Instead, it's like harming them, so they're taking it out. So what causes coral bleaching?
Okay, so there are different types of causes for coral bleaching. One of them being climate change or change in temperature in ocean water. Coral colonies normally live in shallow ocean water where they're able to receive just enough sunlight to sustain them. However, when temperatures gets too hot or the algae living in the coral polyp starts to release harmful chemicals that irritates and stresses them out. When this happens, the coral polyp then tries to eject all of its algae. Another one would be sedimentation. Excessive sedimentation in the ocean is very detrimental to our corals. This often is caused by erosion due to human activities, such as burning, destruction of trees, and even off-roading. Trees and grasses are what keeps soil in its place, and without them, soil can move freely, especially during rainstorms and floods. Whenever rain or flooding occurs, the water carries the loose soil and brings it down to the ocean, polluting the water. Excessive soil in ocean water can block off the sun from coral polyps, um, from their coral polyps' algae, and preventing it from photosynthesizing energy from the sun and providing food for the coral. This then leads to the starvation of corals, and sedimentation not only affects the coral's ability to feed, but it also affects the coral's ability to grow and reproduce. Another one would be ocean acidification, which refers to a change in ocean chemistry in response to the uptake of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is in equilibrium with that in seawater. So when atmospheric concentrations increase, so do oceanic concentrations. Carbon dioxide entering seawater reacts to form carbonic acid, causing an increase in acidity. Ocean acidification is caused by the burning of fossil fuels from factories and vehicles we use today. A negative effect of this is that ocean acidity weakens and dissolves limestones, which is the material corals use to create their homes. And because of the high acidity of ocean water, corals are struggling to reconstruct and reproduce. Another one would be plastic pollution. Plastics that reach the ocean over time turns into microplastic, which are small enough for corals to consume and can eventually lead to infections as well as their death.
So we have eutrophication, which is it's not that common, but it can still happen. So what happens is when farmers use fertilizers, sometimes that fertilizers go and reach the ocean and because of erosion and because algae are like plants. The fertilizer that reaches the ocean causes it to bloom in chunks known as alga bloom. And algal bloom are bad for coral reefs because they take up most of the water's oxygen, leaving little to none for the other organisms such as coral. And it also affects corals like sedimentation, explained in the previous slide, where they block off sunlight for corals. There's also overfishing. Overfishing can lead to eutrophication pred- without fishes as predators for algae, such as phytoplankton. Algae can reproduce in big numbers, and then it'll just begin to cover the ocean floor and then blocking sunlight. And like we mentioned repeatedly throughout this presentation, that without sunlight, many of the marine life cannot survive. We also have pollution from storm generated precipitation, which can rapidly dilute the ocean water, and runoff can carry pollutants which can bleach near shore corals. So solution. We mentioned a lot of like the causes for coral bleaching. So what would be solutions? A lot of the solutions are really easy and plain and simple everyday things that we can do. We can start using energy saving items to slow down the rate of global warming. When visiting coral reefs, we can avoid touching them because although they are pretty to look at with their um, colorful shapes and different, sizes and everything, different types of corals, um, touching them because they are a species can be harmful. So avoid touching them or anchoring your boat next to them. We can be mindful of the ingredients we use in sunscreen. I know a lot of us don't want to get sunburn or become dark, so a lot of us use sunscreen. And what happens is that sunscreen has chemicals, and chemicals can react badly to coral reefs. So we should be a little bit more mindful of that. We could, instead of using a lot of sunscreen, wear long sleeve rash guards, um, and just less sunscreen. We can also reduce, reuse, and recycle trash so that trash do not end up in our ocean. As Andrew said, they can be broken down to microplastics, which can be eaten. And these marine species, again, do not have the knowledge that we have to differentiate between what is food and what is plastic. We can minimize the use of fertilizers because again it can be harmful because of the ingredients contained in them. And homeowners can install water catchments or rain gardens and use rain barrels to collect rainwater that would be otherwise diverted into storm drains. We can plant more trees to prevent erosion. We can ban the use of fire because fire, especially for like hunting, can lead to wildfires. And as we've seen in the news, wildfires once started are nearly impossible to slow down or even stop. And even at that, when they stop, they have taken so much land away because of how fast the fire burned. We can protect mangroves because mangroves protect our coastlines from erosion, storm drain, and they act as buffering and catching sediments. And then, so by them collecting the sediments, we can protect our coral reefs. So our insight: coral reefs may be something that does not seem urgent because again, it is under the water. We don't really see it unless you're going swimming, but we actually depend a lot on coral reefs than we realize. And coral bleaching is as the result of our human actions and our dependence on so much of fossil fuels and burning of our planet instead of using natural resources.
So as we've mentioned, coral reefs takes up about less than 1% of ocean floor. Also, coral reefs consist of 25% of marine life. Um, as we have mentioned, coral bleaching doesn't necessarily mean that corals are dead. They're basically in a sick state where they still have time to restore itself or reconstruct itself. However, if prolonged, they will eventually lead to their death. I believe that one way we could reduce coral bleaching is by simply spreading awareness of what's happening in our ocean. Especially here on Guam, um, Guam relies on its marine life, especially for tourist attraction. And if we were to lose that, I believe that we would lose one of our main beauties of our island.
Again, these are our references that we use for this presentation and for us to gain more awareness as well. You can check these out. Very informative sites, and these are also where we got our pictures from. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you are more informative as we were from doing this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how to recording.